Today we're joined by Lisa Fragala, a second grade teacher in the 4J school district, to talk to us about what are the realities for teachers coming back in the age of COVID, and also to share a very cool recipe. And she's joining us from her kitchen to my kitchen to talk about what's cooking for educators. So Lisa, how are you, and what are your thoughts about what we do during this pandemic to educate children and keep people safe?
Well, first of all, I feel like it's really important to acknowledge how scared everybody is. Um, and that includes families, and it includes children, and it includes educators for sure. We all know that school's not going to look the same when we go back in the fall. And we also know, as the professionals that do this on the front lines every day, that it's incredibly complex. But for me, and I think the same is true for many educators in Oregon, the first priority is that the families we serve are safe. You know, I tell my kids that all the time. Unfortunately, we have that conversation when we have to do active shooter drills. But the first priority for educators is to keep the children we serve safe. And so, what does that look like? What does that mean? It's very, very complicated. Teaching during normal times is very, very complicated. I work in a school of close to 500 children. Figuring out coordinating recess, PE, lunches, travel in the hallway, all of those bodies coming into the school in the morning, it's complicated. And so it's really hard to have a perspective about how to do that safely.
So what are your thoughts, and what do you know, and what advice do you have for both teachers and parents as we go into this new normal of teaching during the pandemic, or remote learning, or some combination of remote and on-site learning?
Mhm. Well, I think it's really important that we focus on the social and emotional well-being of our students. Um, I think that absolutely, as educators, we're committed to their learning, but we also know that we need to focus on their social and emotional learning. And so, if you think about what it would look like to try and enforce social distancing on a playground for young children. That's stressful. If you think about what it would mean for a young child to stay inside of the 35 square foot box, blue taped to the floor around their desk, and not be able to touch anything except for the materials in their desk, that's stressful. I mean, my students, we have a very hands-on learning environment. I try to allow them to develop independence and, personal advocacy. And how do you do all those things? So school's not going to look like school when we get back in the buildings. And I think that's something that people really need to remember, and that the way that we will have to do school to keep everybody safe will potentially be incredibly stressful for our children. And so, in many ways, I think during this time, even though we know there's so many challenges with remote learning, I do think that comprehensive distance learning is probably the best option for starting school in September. It's not that far away.
No.
And the 4J school district has said that they will be starting in September with comprehensive remote learning, and then transitioning sometime in October to a hybrid model. I appreciate the caution that they're taking, but they haven't adequately included educators in thinking about how to transition to a hybrid model. There's absolutely no way we can figure this out with including educators and thinking about how to do this. The Bethel School District has had groups of work groups of educators focusing on everything from how to enter the building in the morning to transportation, working all through July. And that's what we need to see happen. I mean, you wouldn't go get a colonoscopy from an accountant, would you? So we need the professionals.
No.
We need the professionals who know what this means to be involved in planning.
And I think using the Bethel School District as a model, that is a low-income school district. Many of those schools, especially the elementary schools, are 100% free and reduced lunch. There are many families that, when we work together on funding the Bethel Satellite Library, there were many families where kids didn't have access to a computer at home. They didn't have a quiet place to learn. They're, living in a manufactured home, which was really small with a lot of family members. So thinking about, and many students with other issues or special needs. So thinking about how do we educate children? How do we make sure they're fed? How do we make sure they're safe? How do we make sure they can learn or have access, whether it's in Bethel or 4J or in some of our rural districts where they don't have high-speed internet, right? Not everyone has high-speed internet or access to a computer. We need to think through all these things. And I agree that you're right. We have to have educators at the table. We have to have, sanitation staff at the table to think about what is cleaning to the level that we need with COVID look like. We need to have administrators at the table. We need to have family representatives at the table. And Bethel has had a long history of including lots of different groups in collaborative community decision-making. And I think you're right, that is the right outcome. What can we do as citizens? I don't have children in the schools anymore, but I did. And what can we do to support local teachers and to support our kids?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to reflect a little bit on one thing you said, and that piece around equity, I think, is absolutely critical. And that is one thing that I know the Oregon Education Association and my local, the Eugene Education Association, have really been advocating for. You're right, we need to make sure that families have access to food. We need to make sure that connectivity is done much better. So I absolutely agree with that. So thanks for amplifying that concern. In terms of what can the public do, well, first of all, there's the 3 W's, right? The governor's always saying, watch your social distancing, wear a mask, and wash your hands. So we still do have a month before school is back in session. So if we can start to limit the spread, that will make it easier for us to go back to school in the fall, in the buildings. We're going back to school. We just might be distance learning, or we might be in a hybrid model. But the more we can stop the spread, the better off we will be. And so that means every Oregonian has a responsibility to wear a mask and to watch their social distancing and to wash their hands. It's critical. The governor released new guidelines today, and we had, I think, 200 cases reported today. That's a 26% increase from last week. And that half of those cases, apparently, they can't contact trace. So that means they're being spread in the community and we don't know where. They also know that wearing a mask limits the spread. So every Oregonian really has to take this seriously. We're all in this together, and we have to remember that. So that's definitely one thing. I think the other thing that's really important is to remember that school is not going to look the same in the fall. And we have to come to terms with that as a community. No matter how much we want it to look the same, it's not going to look the same. And so I'm not sure really what the general public can do to address that, but I do know that when I was teaching last spring, the kids did great for the most part. They really did. We need to differentiate more, but it was the parents or the caregivers in families that were struggling, people at home having to work and to educate their children at the same time. I mean, I had kids that were doing their work at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, because that's when parents could look at it with them. So I would say that we need our society to be more flexible in response to how people are going to have to do their jobs. And that comes at the state representative level, and it comes from the business community, right? We have to support Oregon workforce to be able to contend with the challenges that are going to happen from whether or not our schools are a hybrid model or whether or not we are doing comprehensive distance learning. So those are a few thoughts.
That is fantastic. And while we're home, everybody's looking for new recipes, and you have one to share with us.
I do. And I will admit, I think like many people, I've been doing a lot of baking, and I've been working on learning new recipes and perfecting them. So I eat paleo, which means that I don't eat any grains. And that means no grains. That doesn't mean gluten-free. That means no rice, no barley, no quinoa, nothing. So I cook paleo, and I've been doing a lot of paleo baking. And I have a paleo blueberry, blackberry cobbler recipe to share with your viewers today.
That is fantastic. So we've got that listed. And is there any advice for people who are trying out this recipe, sort of helpful hints?
Well, it's a recipe that I've adapted. So, don't be afraid of adapting it. I would say the tapioca starch is really important in getting the cobbler to gel, but don't over add that, because you'll taste it if you over add it. And I think the lemon zest is a really key ingredient. It really brings out the freshness of the blueberries and the raspberries. And I have blueberries in my yard. We all know we can pick blackberries in Oregon, so using fresh fruit is really good. And you could modify this to be peaches, which are coming in now, or whatever other fruit you want.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for the work you're doing. Thanks for advocating for kids and for giving us a little window into your world.
Thank you, Val. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for all the work you do in the state of Oregon. It's always great to see you.
Want to see more What's Cooking with Val? Make sure to subscribe to our page by clicking the link.